Hey guys, this is Jeff. I'm here today with Chef Willie.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Well, I'm here to show you our Pizza Master oven. I want to give you a little bit of the history and background of the oven, then I want to walk you through some of the controls and some of the features and how we use it. First of all, let me start with how we got to this oven. When I was first making pizzas at home, I noticed that my oven just wasn't hot enough. I was going on tours of all the world's best pizzerias. I'd gone to Italy. I went up to my favorite places in New York and New Haven. And I noticed a lot of them were using either wood-fired ovens or coal-fired ovens, which obviously I couldn't get in my apartment and later in my house. But I did a lot of crazy things to try and get the super high heat that those wood and coal-fired ovens had. Like one time I wrapped my entire oven in aluminum foil just to keep the heat in, and I melted a couple of components. But eventually I realized that I could bake on a home oven in the cleaning cycle, because the cleaning cycle just incinerates the contents. Although most ovens at home, the controls will only go up to 500 or 550 degrees, the truth is that the heating elements themselves are rated much hotter. And if you put it on the cleaning cycle, they can get up to 900 degrees. The only problem is they lock the door when they put that cycle on. So what I did was I clipped the lock off and I started to bake on the cleaning cycle. This takes a little bit of adjustments with aluminum foil and a lot of crazy things that I did. But I eventually got a great pizza in an electric oven rather than in a coal or wood-fired oven. So when it came time to launch the pizzeria, I had a choice to go with either coal or wood or with electric. And after doing a lot of research and a lot of studying, I decided to stick with an electric oven because as you'll see, the big problem that a lot of pizzerias have is controlling the temp. It's not so much getting the high temp. Yes, a wood or coal-fired oven can get a very high temp, as can this. But those other ovens are very difficult to control the balance of the heat, and a lot of times the pizza suffers. A lot of people think that the wood or the coal is adding this smoky aroma to the pies. And maybe it does just a little bit, but compared to the overall product improvement, the overall standardization of the heat, you get a lot more control, a lot more consistent product. You're going to get a lot better pie most of the time out of this oven than you will in even some of the world's top pizzerias. So let me give you a little bit of the background to this oven. When I went searching for this oven, I almost gave up because I didn't think that there was an electric oven that was commercial grade that would handle it. But I emailed a guy in Sweden, and as soon as I sent him the first email, I seen his website online, I knew instantly that he was just a cut above any of the other oven builders that I had spoken to, including guys in Naples, Italy, that I had traveled to, guys in San Francisco, in Boston, New Haven, New York, Texas. So I actually decided to take a trip to Sweden, to a little town called Borås, Sweden, which is about a 4-hour train ride from Stockholm, just to test the oven. And as soon as I touched it, I realized that this guy definitely knew what he was talking about and that this was a great oven. However, the oven was not even approved for use in the United States. None of the components were UL listed. If you go on the bottom of a lot of electronics, you'll see a little sticker that says UL listed. Well, that means it's been tested and approved with arc currents and electrical currents, and all electrical appliances have to be UL rated to be put into a commercial environment. So we actually had to go through the process. We had to submit engineering drawings to underwriters' labs, and they had to come out and test the oven multiple times. They spent probably 8 hours here just pulling out parts and components and gadgets and circuits out of it just to check their serial numbers, and it was a whole production. But we got the oven approved for use. The oven that you're going to be using in your shop is the kicked up model of that. It's the sort of finalized, standardized version of this same oven. Because since that time, the whole product line has been approved for use. So it's a great, great, great oven. I'm really glad that we're using it. What I want to do now is I want to walk you through first the controls, then some of the tools, then some of the ways that we use the oven. So let's get started, okay? So we're just going to start over on this side, and we're going to work our way across, and we're going to show some of the controls. These boxes on the side, we are not going to be using these anymore. This was a feature that we tried out and didn't really end up using, so you won't see that on your oven. So the first thing I want to mention are these vents. So if you pull this vent this way forward, that means the vent is open. There's a little vent in the back here that opens and closes, and I can just see it here when I pull this dial. As a general rule, we just keep this open. I used to keep it closed on the idea that I was keeping the heat in, but I had a long, complicated discussion with the guy who built the oven, and it's a little technical. It has to do with how the moisture balance, affects heat distribution and transfer. But he explained to me that it's generally better to keep the vents open when the pies are baking. If the oven's not in use for a long period of time, then you can go ahead and close it, and it will save energy. But it will actually make a better pie and use less energy, surprisingly, if the vent is open during most of the time that you're cooking. So pretty much as a general rule, leaving these open is a good idea. Okay, let's move along. Okay, let's talk about the control panels. Now, this oven obviously has 3 decks, and each deck has its own separate controller. Now, the controller controls the temperature, of course, and there's lots of little buttons and dials here. I want to walk you through the most important of them, okay? The oven itself actually has 3 different sets of heating elements. There's a heating element at the front top, there's a set of heating elements at the back top, and then there's a set of heating elements at the bottom, okay? So there's front and back top and 1 set at the bottom. This panel allows you to control all 3 sets independently. However, the difference between the front and the back can only be set one time. It can't be set while the oven is going. It can only be set when you turn the oven on and off, and it really can just be set one time. And we have a specific way we like to set it. Let me show you how we do that. To do that, we turn the oven off, and we hold down the set button. The set button, if you can see that there's a plus and minus button right here, and right between them there's a little button that says set. That button has a couple of uses that we're going to cover. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the set button down while I turn the oven on. Okay? And this says SFH, set front heat. Okay? Set front heat. And you can see that there's a number here set to number 4. And, oops, I waited too long. Let's do it again. Turning it back on. Set front heat. You can see that I can set this number up 1, 2, 3, 4. And 4 is as high as it goes. And that's what we want. We want the front heat to be a little bit hotter. This sets the front heat to the maximum differential between the front and the back, which is 4. And what that is going to allow us to do, that's going to allow that for the fact that when we open the door, heat's going to escape out of the front, whereas the back holds its heat a lot better. Make sense? So we want to do this for every single deck. And this really only needs to be done one time. However, you want to check it every once in a while. You want to make sure that somebody didn't make a mistake and set it back. You should see there all 3 decks should be set to 4. Okay? Turn it off. Turn it back on. Okay. Now, the oven is on, but each deck individually is off. So I'm going to hold down this button here that says auto, and that's going to turn the deck on. You can see the temperature here is 368 degrees. That's a Celsius temperature, so that's right around 700 degrees. We generally bake right in that range. Sometimes it can go a little cooler, sometimes a little hotter. I'm going to cover when you would want to set this hotter and when you would want to set it colder when we actually get into baking the pies. But as a general rule, set to 368, 369, that's the temperature that we set at. Now, you can see here that it has 2 numbers, 8 and 2. 8 here represents the setting for the top heat, and 2 is the setting for the bottom heat. And that's pretty standard for us. Obviously, we can set these up and down, but as a general rule, we keep this set at 8 and set at 2. Now, why do we want it hotter at the top than the bottom? Let me explain that to you. If you were to put your hand, for example, in the oven, and it was getting hot, you would feel heat coming from the top and you would feel heat coming from the bottom. But the second you touched your hand to the bottom or the top, if you touched it to the bottom, for example, the bottom would begin to burn right away. In other words, and it's the same for the pie. So touching the surface is a lot more than just the heat of the oven, more than just the radiative heat of the oven. So since the pie is touching the bottom of the stone, the heat is transferring from that stone to the pizza much, much, much faster, even if it's at a lower temp. So we want most of the radiative heat coming from the top and much less heat coming from the bottom because the bottom's in direct contact with the pie and will burn it. So 8 and 2 is how we set it most of the time. And as you get used to it, you'll learn a rotation where you might have to adjust one of those numbers up or down just a little bit. Now, I want to mention one other thing. I want to mention the turbo feature. So let's look at this other panel. This oven is off right now. So if I put this on and it goes to 369, you're going to see that it turns this little light on over here that says turbo. Now, what does that mean? That means that the oven is so cold and has so far to go to get to 369, then rather than honor your requested 8 and 2, the oven automatically just puts all the heating elements on. Front, top, back, bottom, everything is on. So it's really essentially, when that button is on, regardless of what this says, 8 and 2, it's really 10 and 10. So that can create a little bit of a problem. Not a huge problem, but a little bit of a problem. The problem that creates is that if we allow that to go all the way, then the oven will be out of balance when we get there, because we really do want it to honor the 8 and the 2. So what we do is we bring the temp down just a little bit. Bring it down, let's say 335, something like that, yeah? And then we let the turbo bring it up to that temp. Then what we do, once it's up to that temp and the light goes off, then we go ahead and boost it the rest of the way to 368, and it will do that without the turbo feature, and it will begin to honor the 8 and the 2, which is our request. So that's an important thing to know. Now, if you want to see what temperature the oven is at right this second, because this is what you're asking it to be, but obviously it's not at that yet, we just turned this deck on, hit this set button, the same one that we used to change the set front heat feature. If we hit this right now, it'll tell us that this oven is only at 80 degrees Celsius, which is right around maybe 160, 170 Fahrenheit. So this has a long way to go. Okay, so but it doesn't take that long. It takes maybe 15 minutes to heat up all the way. The oven is very fast. This is another advantage of this electric oven over, say, a wood-burning or coal-burning oven, is this comes up to temperature and is much more even in temperature, much quicker. Those other ovens can literally take hours to heat up and get even remotely even. Now, I did want to mention one other thing. We're going to be cooking in this middle deck in just a few minutes. Now, if I were to cook in the middle deck by itself without turning the top and the bottom heating elements on, the oven's not exactly going to be as balanced as we're used to. So in production, when we're going very quickly, we normally have at least the bottom 2 decks on, sometimes the top deck on. If one day we come in and it's not that busy, we're going to turn this deck off, you'll find that the deck you have on isn't really performing the exact same way. And so that can be confusing to you. And so as a general rule, we keep at least the bottom 2 decks on to keep the temperature in there a little more consistent, and so whoever's operating the oven has a better idea and is working more the way that they're used to working it. Okay, I want to go over some of the other tools now. So we have the wood peel. Now the wood peel we use to put the pizza in the oven. This surface is very porous, and you can put flour on it. It keeps the dough separated so it doesn't really stick as much as it would, for example, with some metal surfaces. But this peel is not so great for getting the pie out of the oven. It's pretty thick. So once you put the pie in, it's sort of hard to get the peel back under and pull the pie out. The peel that we use the most often to control the pie inside the oven is this round peel. It's got a long handle. It's metal. It's very thin and pointy. So you can sort of get this in here and get underneath the pie and lift it up. But this head is a little small. It's great actually for turning the pies. And there's a little trick I want to show you guys for how the pie gets rotated once we get a pie in the oven. And this peel is great for that. But if the pie has a problem, if for example there's a hole in the pie, you might find it hard to get the pie out of the oven with this small peel. So what we do instead is we use this peel. This peel is sort of our disaster cleanup peel. Some guys like to use it in service, but it's very difficult to really turn the pies with these, so I tend not to do it. But if you have a pie that's a problem and you want to get under the whole pie and just get it out of the oven, this is a great little peel to use. Okay.